Tonight, congressional leaders come up with a short-term bailout for the U.S. auto industry. A government car czar would make sure the automakers hold up their end of the bargain. I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, laid-off workers say, how about a bailout for us? Hundreds hold a sit-in at a shuttered window factory in Chicago, demanding federal bailout money be used to help them. In this economy, can a high-priced coffee experience survive? Why can't you do small, medium, and large like normal people? An exclusive interview with the CEO of Starbucks. And they're not just for kids. A surprising number of adults are also hooked on video games.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. It looks tonight like the U.S. auto industry will get a life preserver from taxpayers, but it won't be nearly as big as the car makers wanted, and here's one reason. A CBS News poll out tonight shows the public deeply divided over helping the big three. That same poll, though, tells us why GM, Ford, and Chrysler need a government loan. Nearly a third of Americans are less likely to buy their cars while they're in financial trouble. Cheryl Atkinson has the latest.
Today on Capitol Hill, lawmakers were trying to do something Congress doesn't usually do very well, move at lightning speed to negotiate the fine points of a complex plan, one to shore up the auto industry for at least the next few weeks as the clock ticks toward bankruptcy. A draft of the plan calls for GM and Chrysler and Ford, if needed, to borrow up to $15 billion. They would have to develop long-term restructuring plans. The plans would be evaluated every 45 days by a car czar and/or a board of advisors appointed by the president. The automakers would have to submit a detailed restructuring plan to Congress by March 31st. Christopher Dodd heads up the Senate Banking Committee and is a key negotiator.
If Congress passes something this week, this is a Band-Aid measure to get us through the short term. This is not the bailout the industry was seeking of $34 billion plus.
There's no appetite for that here. With all due respect, these are self-created problems.
But Dodd says if the automakers' long-term plans look good in the spring, it'll give Congress the confidence to commit more tax dollars. As for taxpayer protections, there would be oversight and access to company records by the GAO and Inspector General, limits on how much pay and bonuses auto executives get, and something called super seniority, which means taxpayers get paid back before anybody else. And by the way, the companies would have to get rid of their fancy passenger jets.
We're going to create, by March 31, we hope, a profitable and viable automobile industry for this country.
If that doesn't sound ambitious enough, how about this? The first evaluation of the company's progress toward developing a long-term restructuring plan is due in just 3 weeks by the car czar and the presidential appointees who haven't even been chosen yet. Katie?
And Cheryl, is there anything at this point that could still hold up this deal?
One big thing is support from the White House. Right now, the White House hasn't signed off on the deal. The negotiating is going on. President Bush has to be convinced that this isn't throwing good money after bad, and that sales job will probably be going on into the night.
All right, Cheryl Atkinson on Capitol Hill tonight. Cheryl, thank you. The likelihood of help for the big three gave Wall Street a boost today. The Dow gained nearly 300 points, or 3.5%, and closed at its highest level in a month. In Chicago, a group of factory workers watched, like the rest of us, as taxpayers bailed out the financial industry and soon the auto industry. Now these laid-off workers are demanding Bank of America spend some of its bailout money on them. The bank had been providing the factory with financing, but cut it off, and as Dean Reynolds reports, the workers are staging a sit-in.
In the parking lot of the Republic Windows and Doors factory in Chicago, it was all quiet, but a closer look showed employees working 3 shifts, not doing their jobs, but protesting.
And we aren't going anywhere. We are committed. It's time for the little man to stand up.
Last Tuesday, 300 workers were given 3 days' notice that the company was folding, which it did on Friday without paying them any severance. So they took over the place.
What we really want here is to save the jobs, because it's 300 people without jobs.
Vincente Rangel has put in 15 years and was earning $19 an hour.
You start thinking about your payments, your bills, your mortgage, your rent.
The sit-in has grabbed the attention of politicians, including the president-elect, and others who believe it exemplifies an imbalance between a Wall Street that gets government help and a Main Street that gets the shaft.
What do we want?
Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich says he's headed to court for the workers because federal law mandates that they be paid for unused vacation time. They're also due either 60 days notice or pay for that time.
But somehow these workers always end up on the bottom. It's wrong.
Aside from the company managers who've essentially disappeared, the workers' anger is directed at the Bank of America, which cut off Republic's line of credit, preventing it from paying its employees. So the state of Illinois has now suspended all business with the bank, which got a $25 billion share of the recent government aid package.
The taxpayers who do all the work in our country have been already asked to bail out these big banks. Then we expect those banks to bail out businesses like this to keep them afloat and keep these workers working.
Late tonight, the Bank of America released a statement saying these workers behind me do indeed deserve to be paid, but it's not the bank's problem, it's the employers. And they said it was unfortunate that the company was unable to reverse its declining circumstances. Katie?
Dean Reynolds reporting tonight from Chicago. Also in Chicago, another company has run into financial trouble. Tribune Company, the media conglomerate that owns major newspapers and nearly 24 TV stations, said today it's filing for Chapter 11. Ben Tracy has the bad news.
Newspapers are in the business of writing headlines, but today they were making them. Tribune Company, owner of the LA Times and the Chicago Tribune, filed for bankruptcy protection to restructure its debt. In a letter to employees, Sam Zell, the company's controversial billionaire owner, blamed the economy, calling it the perfect storm, a precipitous decline in revenue and a tough economy coupled with a credit crisis. Tribune Company, which also owns the Chicago Cubs baseball team, has $13 billion in debt. Much of it incurred when Zell took the company private last year. Legal reporter Henry Weinstein took a buyout a few months later.
We've had several sets of layoffs. He's lost Pulitzer Prize winners. He has diminished the quality of his own asset rapidly in the last several months.
But pain at the presses is a story from coast to coast, as several newspapers have folded for good. And in the past 2 years, 43,000 newspaper jobs have been cut. The Minneapolis Star-Tribune just announced 25 more job cuts in its effort to trim $30 million in costs, while the New York Times is borrowing against its Manhattan headquarters. The problem? Classified advertising, which used to make up roughly half of ad revenue, is evaporating, as websites such as Craigslist offer online classifieds for free.
But they're also being hit by the economy itself and retailers cutting back and going out of business. So it's sort of a triple whammy.
But for now, Tribune Company says it will be business as usual at its papers as it works to restructure its debt. Ben Tracy, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Down the coast from LA, tragedy today in a residential neighborhood of San Diego. A fighter jet crashed while on a training mission. The pilot ejected safely, but there are fatalities. Sandra Hughes has the latest.
The F-18 Hornet exploded into flames in a residential area near a school and busy freeway. At least 2 people were killed on the ground.
There might have been a grandmother and a mother and 2 children at home, but we only have 2 confirmed right now.
Neighbors were rushed out of homes as the fire grew.
I just heard a big explosion. And then just flames going all over the place.
Witnesses turned to the skies when they heard the jet was in trouble. Military officials blame a mechanical malfunction.
I heard and saw the pilot eject and the aircraft go down. My next move was to find the pilot,
who had been trying to land at Miramar Marine Air Station just 2 miles away.
I found him, and he came down into a tree in a residential area.
The pilot was taken to a nearby hospital. The F-18 Hornet has long been the workhorse of the Navy and Marines since its design in the 1970s. However, all F-18 models were recently grounded after cracks were found on a hinge in the aircraft. Only a small number were found to have similar cracks. The rest returned to the air. The pilot in this crash was just returning from a training mission on an aircraft carrier in the Pacific. Sandra Hughes, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Still ahead on the CBS Evening News, trouble brewing at Starbucks. Is the iconic coffee chain losing its buzz? An exclusive interview with the star of Starbucks, CEO Howard Schultz. But up next, this Baghdad shooting of civilians led to violent protests. Now 5 American security guards face manslaughter charges.